All right, more Rails. Let's get the basics set up here. Start the server. All right. So we're going to be doing some mild customization of our static Rails pages. As tutorial guy says, Rails views can simply contain static HTML. So that's what we're going to make. We're going to have something that says this is the home page for the Ruby on Rails tutorial sample application. I'm going to preview that. Oops. Now. I pop this out somehow, so we'll make that go away. I haven't explored these little side options here. I guess this is if you were working with some bros. This is some kind of outline thing. AWS resources, a debugger. Okay. We want to go to the actual URL for the static pages homepage. And there it is. Like, why isn't it working? Because I went to the root, the root folder, which is still the hello world stuff. You're looking for stuff in the right place is very important. It's like, that comes before like elite programming hacks and all that. Just am I in the place I'm supposed to be? Oh, I'm like kind of skipping the video for the reason that the videos are actually, I've got it open here. I've actually got it open in VLC. I'll just right. But the videos are actually less updated than the text. I think he made them a while ago, and so like the text is, is fine. If I'm like super confused about something, I'll check out the video, but so we've done that, and now we want to, oops, it's in the wrong window. There we go. If I try and save shortcut not in the Amazon Web Services window, it tries to like save the page. See, we don't want to do that. So let's see. So we'll customize the help.html2. And we'll look at that. Pages. Help. Yay. Okay. Sick. So I'll use my reader mode thing. Oh, video looks kind of funny. So having created and filled in the home and help pages for our sample app, we're now going to add an about page as well. When making a change of this nature, it's a good practice to write an automated test to verify that the feature is implemented correctly. Developed over the course of building an application, the resulting test suite serves as a safety net and as executable documentation of the application source code. When done right, writing tests also allows us to develop faster, despite requiring extra code. because we'll end up wasting less time trying to track down bugs. This is only true once we get good at writing tests, though, which is one reason it's important to start practicing as early as possible. Although virtually all Rails developers agree that testing is a good idea, there's a diversity of opinion on the details. There's an especially lively debate over the use of test-driven development, a testing technique in which the programmer writes failing tests first and then writes the application code to get the test to pass. The Ruby on Rails tutorial takes a lightweight, intuitive approach to testing, employing TDD when convenient without being dogmatic about it. When deciding when and how to test, it's helpful to understand why to test. In my view, writing automated tests has three main benefits. Protecting against regressions when a functioning feature stops working for some reason. They allow code to be refactored with greater confidence. Tests act as a client for the application code, thereby helping determine its design and its interface with the other parts of the system. Although none of the above benefits require the test be written first, there are many circumstances where TDD is a valuable tool to have in your kit. Deciding when and how to test depends in part on how comfortable you are writing tests. Many developers find out that as they get better at writing tests, they are more inclined to write them first. It also depends on how difficult the test is relative to the application code, how precisely the desired features are known, and how likely the feature is to break in the future. In this context, it's helpful to have a set of guidelines on when we should test first or test at all. Here are some suggestions based on my own experience. When a test is especially short or simple compared to the application code it tests, lean towards writing the test first. Well, that makes sense. If it's easy. When the desired behavior isn't yet crystal clear, lean toward writing the application code first. Right, if you don't quite know what it's going to do, you don't know what to test for, then write a test to codify the result. Because security is a top priority, err on the side of writing tests of the security model first. Whenever a bug is found, write a test to reproduce it and protect against regressions, then write the application code to fix it. Lean against writing tests for code such as detailed HTML structure likely to change in the future. Well, that makes sense. Write tests before refactoring code, focusing on testing error-prone code that's especially likely to break. In practice, the guidelines above mean that we'll usually write controller and model tests first and integration tests, which test functionality across models using controllers second. And when we're writing application code that isn't particularly brittle or error-prone, or is likely to change, we'll often... When we're writing application code that isn't particularly brittle or error-prone or is likely to change, as is often the case with views, we'll often skip testing altogether. Our main testing tools will be controller tests, starting in this section, model tests starting in Chapter 6, and integration tests starting in Chapter 7. Integration tests are especially powerful as they allow us to simulate the actions of a user interacting with our application using a web browser. That's cool. Integration tests will eventually be our primary testing technique, but controller tests give us an easier place to start. All right. I think the regular browser view is fine. Now it's time to add an about page to our application. Cool. As we'll see, the test is short and simple, so we'll follow the guidelines from box 3.3 and write the test first. Okay. Then we'll use the failing test to drive the writing of the application code. Getting started with testing can be challenging, requiring extensive knowledge of both Rails and Ruby. At this early stage, writing tests might thus seem hopelessly intimidating. Luckily, Rails has already done the hardest part for us because Rails Generate Controller automatically generated a test file to get us started. How helpful. So test. Controllers. Static pages. Cool. Let's look at it. Close this. Yeah. We should make this whole window bigger too. Give that Cloud IDE some space. Awesome. Okay. So, require test helper. Class static pages controller test. So it's inheriting from action dispatch integration test. It's inheriting from an integration test class thingy. So this looks like test should get home, get static HTML. So it tries to do a get on this URL, I think. Or no, well, the equivalent of this, home instead of help. And then it should get success, I guess. And same with help. Yeah, I can't necessarily describe in detail what this is doing, but I think I get the idea. It's not important at this point to understand the syntax. Okay. But we can see that there are two tests, one for each controller action we included on the command line. Yeah, I can see that. Each test simply gets a URL and verifies via an assertion that the result is a success. Here, the use of get indicates that our tests expect the home and help pages to be ordinary web pages accessed using a get request. The response success is an abstract representation of the underlying HTTP status code, in this case 200 OK. All right. In other words, a test like this thing says, let's test the home page by issuing a GET request to the static page's home URL, and then make sure. Oh, well, let's test the home page by issuing. I guess it's okay. Let's test the home page by X and Y, and then Y. Yeah, okay, fine. And then making sure we receive a success status code in response. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. To begin our testing cycle, we need to run our test suite to verify that the test currently passed. We can do this with Rails commands as follows. With the Rails command as follows. Okay. Rails DB migrate. Oh, by the way, am I still supposed to be on the static pages branch, or did we merge? Let me double check that. Maybe I skipped something earlier. I think I'm okay as far as the Git branch stuff. All right, so Rails DB migrate, we did that. Now let's do Rails test. I should make this bigger too. Oh, can I? Okay. Huh. It's interesting. Make this bigger. But this is immune to command plus. Weird. Okay. Well, now I'm curious about that. Okay. Preferences, user settings, editor, terminal. User set. Editor, terminal. Size. Awesome. It's a little smaller. There we go. Much better. It's legible. Imagine if Apple comes out with like a 32-inch iMac or something, how big we'll be able to make our terminal fonts. That'd be cool. Okay. I mean, 35-inch curved. This optional configuration thing to make the test reporting look nice or look nicer. So I'm gonna try that. Oh yeah, there we go. Now it shows a little green bar because everything's cool. Okay. For the effort expended, I think that was worth it. Okay. As noted in box 3.3, test-driven development involves writing a failing test first, writing the application code needed to get it to pass, and refactoring the code if necessary. Because many testing tools represent failing tests with the color red and passing tests with the color green. This sequence is sometimes known as the red-green refactor cycle. So, because many testing tools represent failing tests with the color red and passing tests with the color green, this sequence is sometimes known as the red-green refactor cycle. In this section, we'll complete the first step in this cycle, getting to red by writing a failing test. Then we'll get to green in section 3.33, 3.3.3, and refactor in 3.4.3. Our first step is to write a failing test for the About page. By following the models in listing 3.14, can you guess what it should be? The answer appears in listing 3.16. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's just literally putting about in. So test controller, static page controller. I still have it open. Okay. I guess I'll move that back. There we go. And then we see from the highlighted lines that the test for the About page is the same as for home and help with the word about in place of home or help. Yep, we do see that. And now we're on 3 tests, 2 assertions, 1 error. Undefined local variable and method static. Pages about URL. Yep. Now that we have a failing test, we'll use the failing test error message to guide us to a passing test, thereby implementing a working About page. We can get started by examining the error message output by the failing test. Undefined local variable or method static pages about URL. The error message says that the Rails code for the About page is undefined, which is a hint that we need to add a line for the roots file. We can accomplish this by following the pattern in listing 3.8 as shown in listing 3.19. Right. Still have roots open? No, I gotta open it. Config roots. There it is. Okay. Run it again. It still fails. The highlighted line tells Rails to route a GET request for the URL static page is about to the about action in the static pages controller. This automatically created a helper called static pages about URL. Running our test again, we see that it's still red. But now the error message has changed. So now it's complaining that the action about could not be found for static pages. Yep. That's what it's complaining. The error message now indicates a missing about action in the static pages controller, which we can add by following the model provided by Home and Help in listing 3.9. Oh yeah, I already have that open, huh? Oh no, I've got the test things open. Right. Okay. Let's try again. I'll save. So now it's complaining. Static pages controller about is missing a template for request formats. Text HTML. Missing a template. Mine is a little different, but same idea. This indicates a missing template, which in the context of Rails is essentially the same as a view. It's described in section 3.2.1. An action called home is associated with a view called home.html.arb located in app/view/static pages, which means that we need to create a new file about .html.erb in the same directory. The way to create a file varies by system setup, but most text editors will let you control-click inside a directory to bring up new file menu item. Alternatively, you can use the file menu to create a new file and then pick the proper directory, or you can use the Unix touch command. I'm going to do that. So that's app views. All right. About. Cool. As mentioned in the learn enough command line to be dangerous. Touch is designed to update the modification timestamp of a file or directory without otherwise affecting it, but as a side effect, it creates a new blank file if it doesn't already exist. That's cool. If using a Cloud IDE, you may have to refresh your file tree. Once you've created the file in the right directory, you should fill it with the contents shown below. Okay. So then let's look at it. A boot. All right. Sick. At this point, running Rails test should get us back to green. Let's see. Nice. Of course, it's never a bad idea to look at the page in a browser. That's what I did first. All right. Now that we've gotten to green, we are free to refactor our code with confidence. Nice. When developing an application, often code will start to smell gross, meaning that it gets ugly, bloated, or filled with repetition. The computer doesn't care what the code looks like, of course, but humans do, so it's important to keep the code base clean by refactoring frequently. Although our sample app is a little too small to refactor now, code smell seeps in at every crack, and we'll get started refactoring in 3.4.3. Okay. I was not really familiar with this code smell. A characteristic in the source code of a problem that possibly indicates a deeper problem. Interesting. So now that we've created actions and views for some static pages, we'll make them slightly dynamic by adding some content that changes on a per page basis. We'll have the title of each page reflect its content. Whether changing a title truly represents dynamic content is debatable, but in any case, it lays the necessary foundation for unambiguously dynamic content in Chapter 7. Our plan is to edit the home, help, and about pages to make page titles that change on each page. This will involve using the title tag in our page views. Most browsers display the contents of the title tag at the top of the browser. And it is also important for search engine optimization. I see, so right now we've got like sample app instead of about. We'll be using the full red-green refactor cycle. First by adding a simple test for our page titles, then by adding the titles to each of our 3 pages, and then using a layout file to eliminate duplication. That's the refactor part. By the end of this section, all 3 of our static pages will have titles of the form page name Ruby on Rails tutorial sample app, where the first part of the title will vary depending on the page. The Rails new command creates a layout file by default, but it's instructive to ignore it initially, which we can do by changing its name. You would normally do this in a real application, but it's easier to understand the purpose of the layout file if we start by disabling it. Okay. To add page titles, we need to learn or review the structure of a typical web page, which takes the form in listing 3.24. This is covered in much more depth than learn enough HTML to be dangerous, which I should probably do at some point. All right. Although nothing here is confusing. In fact, I could probably, because I've looked at HTML some, I probably wouldn't even have really needed to figure out kind of what's going on here. The structure in listing 324 includes a document type or doc type, declaration at the top to tell browsers which version of HTML we're using. In this case, HTML5. A head section, in this case with greeting inside a title tag. And a body section, in this case with hello world inside a P tag. The indentation is optional. HTML is not sensitive to white space and ignores both tabs and spaces, but it makes the document structure easy to see. Yeah. We'll write simple tests for each of the titles in Table 3.2 by combining the tests in Listing 3.16 with the assert select method, which lets us test for the presence of a particular HTML tag, sometimes called a selector, hence the name. So we're going to be checking that the title exists. In particular, the code above checks for the presence of a title tag containing the string home Ruby on Rails tutorial sample app. Applying this idea to all three static pages gives the test shown in Listing 3.25. Right, so we've gone from merely testing for a successful get of the page. Now we're adding a test of. All right, so let's add these. All right, so all the tests are going to fail right now because we haven't changed the titles. Yep, 3 failures. Now we'll add a title to each page, getting the tests from section 341 to pass in the process. Applying the basic HTML structure from listing 324 to the custom homepage, listing 312 yields 327. So where's that? Where's home? App, use, home. Following this model for the help page, the about page yields the following. I think I have about already open. Let's do that. All right, and then we'll do help. And here we go. All right, sick. What does he say? Beginning in this section, we'll start making modifications to the applications and the exercises that won't generally be reflected in future code listings. The reason is so that the text makes sense to readers who don't complete the exercises. But as a result, your code will diverge from the main text if you do solve them. Learning to resolve small discrepancies like this is an excellent example of technical sophistication. So you may have noticed some repetition in the static pages controller. Let's bring that up. In particular, the base title Ruby on Rails tutorial sample app is the same for every title test. I want to be in the static pages controller test. Let's close all tabs. There we go. Using the special function setup, which is automatically run before every test, verify that the tests in listing 3.31 are still green. Listing 3.1 uses an instance variable seen briefly before and covered later, combined with string interpolation, which is further covered in section 421. Okay. So you see we're setting this base title to Ruby on Rails tutorial sample app, and then we're interpolating it into our tests. All right. Awesome. We're rolling now. We've already achieved a lot in this section, generating 3 valid pages using Rails controllers and actions. But they are purely static HTML and hence don't show off the power of Rails. Moreover, they suffer from terrible duplication. The page titles are almost but not quite exactly the same. Ruby on Rails tutorial sample app is common to all 3 titles. The entire HTML skeleton structure is repeated on each page. This repeated code is a violation of the important don't repeat yourself, or dry, principle. In this section, we'll dry out our code by removing the repetition. At the end, we'll rerun the tests from section 342 to verify that the titles are still correct. Paradoxically, we'll take the first step towards eliminating duplication by first adding some more. We'll make the titles of the pages, which are currently quite similar, match exactly. This will make it much simpler to remove all the repetition at one stroke. This technique involves using embedded Ruby in our views. Since the home, help, and about pages have a variable component, we'll use a special Rails function called provide to set a different title on each page. We'll see how this works by replacing the literal home in the home.html.erb view with the code in listing 332. So what is this code? All right. So listing 332 is our first example of embedded Ruby, also called ERB. Now you know why HTML views have the file extension html.erb. ERB is the primary template system for including dynamic content in web pages. The code provide title home indicates using these brackets and percentage signs that Rails should call the provide function and associate the string home with the label title. Then in the title, we use the closely related notation. They add an equal sign here to insert the title into the template using Ruby's yield function. The distinction between the 2 types of embedded Ruby is that this notation executes the code inside, while this notation executes it and inserts it into the result of the template. Okay. The resulting page is exactly the same as before, except only now the variable part of the title is generated dynamically by ERB. So let's use static home pages. Where is it? So app, views, home. There we go. We can verify all this works by running our tests. Okay. Still green. We're going to do the same on help and about. And run our test again. Yep. Now we've replaced the variable part of the page titles with the ERB. Each of our pages looks something like this. In other words, all the pages are identical in structure, including the contents of the title tag, with the sole exception of the material inside the body tag. Right, because we're doing this providing thing at the beginning here inside the HTML document. So in the actual document, there's just title. And it gets like substituted in there, but the actual content of this is the same. This like line is the same. Yield title, yield title, yield title. Right, okay. In order to factor out this common structure, Rails comes with a special layout file called application.html.erb, which we renamed in the beginning of this section and which we'll now restore. Okay. To get the layout to work, we have to replace the default title with the embedded Ruby from the examples above. So we go to Layout, Application.html.erb. And this line is what we replace. Note this special, note here the special line yield. Okay. This code is responsible for inserting the contents of each page into the layout. It's not important to know how exactly this works. What matters is that using this layout ensures that, for example, when visiting the page staticpages.home, visiting the page staticpages.home or /home converts the contents of home.html.erb to HTML and then inserts it in place of yield. So that's interesting that like the whole page gets inserted into this layout. Like the whole specific page that you're visiting, I guess, gets inserted in here. I didn't have a clear model of how it worked, but I don't know that I would have guessed that. It's also worth noting that the default Rails layout includes several additional lines. Meta tag, style sheet, JavaScript. This code arranges to include the application style sheet and JavaScript, which are part of the asset pipeline together with the Rails method CSP meta tag, which implements content security policy to mitigate cross-site scripting attacks, and CSRF meta tags, which mitigates cross-site request forgery attacks. One huge advantage of using a mature framework like Rails is that it worries about such things so that we don't have to. Fair enough. Even though the tests are passing, there is one detail left to work with. This is a typo. The views in listing 3.32, 3.34, and 3.35 are still filled with all the HTML structure included in the layout. Since it's redundant, and indeed leads to invalid HTML markup, we should remove it and leave only the interior contents. So we do that. I notice we're getting rid of the doc type because that's in the layout. That's home. That's help. That's about. What these used to find the home, help, and about pages. Same as before, but they have much less duplication. Let's just run our test real quick. Yep. Experience shows that even fairly simple refactoring is error prone and can easily go awry. This is why having a good test suite is so valuable. So this next exercise is basically to make a contact page for the sample app and follow the testing steps. So the first thing we're going to do is put in something for a contact page in our static pages controller test. Which, I'm just like copy pasting from here and editing basically. Of course, at this stage, the test is going to fail, which is fine. And note we get that undefined local variable or method thing we saw earlier. So now we're just going to add something to the config routes file, or do I still have that open now? Okay. That'll be contact. And so now we get a different error message. The action contact could not be found. So then that was the next step. All right, so now we've got to add, where is it? App controllers. I think that's still, no, that's the test. Close that. App controller, static page controller. I'll just type it in. Okay. We're still failing. Missing template. So now we need to create a view. Contact.html. We did not need to refresh. And so then we just have to paste this. And now if we go to we have a working page, which is pretty cool. See the answers. Right. Where's that test file? No, I forgot the assert select part. Oops. Oops. Messed up. Oh, I guess if you do touch it on an existing file like that, it doesn't actually do anything. Okay. Let's run the test again. Okay, there we go. So now my tests are set up right. Okay. Yeah, so it's all good. But yeah, that's why you should check the answers, see, make sure you didn't overlook something obvious. And then we've customized our site pages and gotten a good start on the test suite. Let's set the application's root route before moving on. As in the previous sections, this involves editing routes.rb to connect to a page of our choice, which in this case will be the home page. And they want us to remove the hello action from the application controller. Sure. So that's done. Get to roots. We're going to change that to that. So then yep, works. Adding the root route in listing 4.2 leads to the creation of a Rails helper called root URL. This isn't quite right. We want this. Yeah. Move that up there. Okay. So adding the root route in listing 3.42 leads to the creation of a Rails helper file root URL. Does it? By filling in the code marked fill in 343, write a test for the root route. So that's straightforward. Let's run that test now. So it was testing red, which is because for whatever reason I put static pages root URL instead of just root URL. So now it tests okay. Because this routes.db is saying the root is static pages home. Whereas what I had written was like the test that I wanted is whether there's a root URL page. I wanted to test whether if I go here, there's the page turns out So I think I was just like blindly copying stuff. Due to the code in listing 342, the test in the previous exercise is already green. True. In such a case, it's harder to be confident that we're actually testing what we think we're testing. So modify the code in listing 342 to comment by commenting out the root route to get to red. Then uncomment it and verify that you get back to green. I see. So this is just a way of making sure that like what we're doing here makes a difference and we're testing for the right thing, right? So we get red there and you get green there. Yep. So that makes sense. Seen from the outside, this chapter hardly accomplished anything. We started with static pages and ended with mostly static pages. But appearances are deceiving. By developing in terms of Rails controllers, actions, and views, we are now in a position to add arbitrary amounts of dynamic content to our site. Cool. Seeing how exactly this plays out is the task for the rest of this tutorial. Before moving on, let's take a minute to commit changes on our topic branch and merge them into the master branch. Git add A. If you haven't been making commits as we've been moving along, and I have not, well, first make a commit indicating that we've reached a stopping point. Then git commit and finish static pages. Git checkout master. Git merge static pages. Static pages. Sec. Git push. Rails test. Oops. Fucked up. Git push. Wasn't expecting the password request. All right. Password failed. What? There we go. That was weird. Just pasted the same thing. Okay. And then Rails test. All right. Git push Heroku. Hurrah! Here we've taken care to run the test suite before deploying, which is a good habit to develop. Sounds reasonable. And we've got it on Heroku. And we've got other pages on here too. So that's cool. So, end of the chapter, end of video.